4 months passed. The Council had forgotten about the human warning. Life continued as normal in the civilized galaxy. Trade ships moved between systems. Colonists built new homes on frontier worlds. No one prepared for war. Praxis 7 was one of those frontier colonies. It belonged to the Kelthon Empire. 12 million people lived there. Most of them were farmers who grew food for the inner worlds. The planet was beautiful, with green fields and blue oceans. The people felt safe. Governor Velix managed the colony. He had been one of the counselors who laughed at the human warning. He remembered making jokes about human paranoia. That seemed like a long time ago now. The alarm started at dawn. Sensors detected massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Governor Velix rushed to the command center. What he saw on the screens made his blood run cold. Ships were emerging from hyperspace. Hundreds of them. Thousands. They looked exactly like the images from the human presentation. Organic, pulsing, hungry. The Ravagers had arrived. The Kelthon defense fleet moved to intercept. 20 warships, proud vessels with powerful energy weapons. They had never lost a battle. The commanders were confident. The confidence lasted exactly 14 minutes. The Kelthon ships opened fire with their plasma cannons. Bright beams of energy lanced across space toward the biological vessels. The energy hit the Ravager ships and simply disappeared. The organic hulls absorbed it like sponges soaking up water. The Ravagers did not return fire with weapons. They did not need to. They simply flew into the Kelthon ships and began feeding. Metal hulls cracked and dissolved. The biological matter of the Ravagers spread across the warships like a disease. One by one, the proud Kelthon fleet was consumed. The screams of the crews echoed across emergency channels. Then there was silence. Governor Velix sent out distress calls in every direction. He begged for help. He pleaded for evacuation ships. Deep down, he knew the truth. No help would arrive in time. Captain Minji Song was patrolling the border when she received the distress signal. Her ship was the Defiant Horizon, a human destroyer. She had a crew of 200 and enough weapons to level a small moon. Commander Byung-ho Kang studied the sensor data at his station. His face was grim. The Ravager fleet at Praxis 7 was massive. The human patrol group only had 5 ships. It would not be enough. Captain Song made her decision in seconds. She opened a channel to Admiral Kim at Fleet Headquarters. She requested permission to engage. The Admiral's response was immediate. Permission granted. Humanity had warned them, but humanity would not abandon civilians to prove a point. Save as many as possible. The 5 human ships changed course and accelerated toward Praxis 7. Captain Song addressed her crew. They all knew the odds. They all volunteered anyway. When they arrived, the scene was like something from a nightmare. Orbital stations were being consumed. Debris filled the space around the planet. The Ravager ships covered the sky like a swarm of insects. Captain Song did not hesitate. She gave the order to engage. The human ships dove into the swarm, but the human weapons were different. Where the Kelthon had used energy beams, the humans used metal and explosives. Railguns fired solid slugs at incredible speeds. Missiles carried nuclear warheads. These were old weapons. Primitive by galactic standards, they worked. The metal slugs punched through organic hulls. The nuclear explosions vaporized entire Ravager ships. The biological vessels could not absorb kinetic energy the same way they absorbed plasma. They bled, they died. Commander Kang coordinated the attack. He identified weak points in the Ravager formation. The human ships focused their fire, creating corridors through the swarm. On the planet's surface, evacuation transports lifted off. Millions of Kelthon civilians packed into cargo ships. They fled toward the safe corridors that the human ships had created, but the Ravagers were learning. They adapted their tactics. More ships swarmed toward the human vessels. The Defiant Horizon shook under impacts. Hull breaches opened on 2 decks. Crew members died at their stations. Captain Song refused to retreat. Every minute they held the line meant more civilians escaped. She pushed her ship and her crew to their limits. The battle lasted 6 hours. It felt like 6 years. By the end, 3 of the 5 human ships were destroyed. The Defiant Horizon was barely functional. Commander Kang had burns across his arms from an electrical fire. Half the crew was dead or wounded, but the last civilian transport had escaped. 4 million Kelthon people had been saved. 8 million had not. As the surviving human ships limped away from Praxis 7, Governor Velik sent one final transmission. He was in an escape pod watching his world die behind him. His voice was broken. He thanked the humans for coming. He apologized for laughing at their warning. He begged for forgiveness. Captain Song responded simply. She said that humanity remembered what it felt like to face extinction alone. They would not let others face it alone. Not if they could help. Governor Velik wept openly. He said he would never forget this. His people would never forget. The transmission ended. The human ships jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, Praxis 7 was consumed completely. The beautiful green fields turned to ash. The blue oceans boiled away. The Ravagers fed and grew stronger. The news spread across the galaxy faster than the Ravagers themselves. The humans had been right. The threat was real, and it was coming for everyone. In the council chamber, High Counselor Threll watched the reports. His purple skin had turned pale. He had doomed his people through arrogance. The question now was whether there was time to fix his mistake. The Ravagers did not care about politics or apologies. They only cared about feeding. And the galaxy was full of food. The Halcyon line stretched across 5-star systems. Thousands of ships waited in formation. Human destroyers anchored the flanks. Kelthon cruisers held the center. Vryn carriers provided fighter support. A dozen other species filled the gaps between them. This was the largest military force ever assembled. Every ship had been retrofitted with human weapons. Mass drivers, railguns, nuclear missiles. The elegant weapons of the Council's golden age were gone. Now they carried the brutal tools of human warfare. Fleet Admiral Tae-Yang Shin commanded the defense from his flagship. He was younger than Admiral Kim, but just as capable. His tactical mind was brilliant. His crews trusted him completely. He would need that trust today. Commander Haewon Yu sat in her fighter cockpit. She led Hammer Squadron, an experimental unit flying new strike craft. The fighters were built for one purpose: to deliver a special weapon into the heart of the enemy formation. Dr. Wan Shik Bei monitored readings from the science station. He had spent the last 3 months developing humanity's secret weapon. It was called the Resonance Pulse Generator. The theory was sound. The simulations were promising, but it had never been tested in real combat. The weapon worked by disrupting the biological cohesion of Ravager ships. Their organic hulls were held together by complex cellular bonds. The resonance pulse would shatter those bonds at the molecular level. In theory, one pulse could destroy dozens of ships. The problem was coordination. 50 ships needed to fire the pulse simultaneously. The targeting had to be perfect. The timing had to be exact. One mistake and the weapon would fail completely. Sensors detected the Ravager fleet at the edge of the system. The readings made experienced officers go pale. This was not just a fleet. This was an armada. Tens of thousands of biological ships moving as one massive organism. Admiral Shin addressed the Allied forces over the fleet-wide channel. His words were simple. Today they would show the Ravagers that the galaxy would not surrender. Today they would prove that life could defeat the void. Today they would win or die together. The Ravagers entered weapons range. The Allied fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons discharged at once. The void lit up with explosions and tracer fire. Metal slugs tore through organic hulls. Nuclear warheads vaporized clusters of bioships, but there were so many Ravagers. For every ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. They swarmed forward like a living tide. Their tactics had evolved. They learned from previous battles. They were adapting. The first Allied ships fell within minutes. A Vryn carrier was overwhelmed by bioships. They covered its hull and began consuming it. The crew evacuated in escape pods. Half of them made it. Commander Yu led her squadron into the chaos. The fighters were small and fast. They weaved between the massive capital ships, drawing Ravager attention. Their job was to create an opening, a corridor through the enemy formation. The Ravagers focused their attacks. They seemed to understand that the fighters were a threat. Bioships broke formation to pursue them. Commander Yu lost 3 pilots in the first pass. She kept flying. The battle raged for hours. Both sides took terrible losses. The space between the fleets was filled with debris and frozen corpses. Communication channels carried screams and prayers in a dozen languages. Admiral Shin watched the tactical display. The Allied line was holding, but barely. Casualties mounted by the minute. At this rate, they would be overwhelmed in another hour. He needed to deploy the resonance weapon now. But the targeting solution was not ready. Dr. Bay worked frantically at his station. The weapon required a precise arrangement of enemy ships. They needed to be clustered together in the right formation. The Ravagers were not cooperating. They moved too randomly. Commander Yu saw what was needed. Her fighters could create the targeting solution. They could force the Ravagers into the right formation. But it would mean flying directly into the densest part of the swarm. Most of her squadron would not survive. She did not hesitate. She gave the order. Hammer Squadron dove toward the Ravager Center. The bioships swarmed after them, exactly as planned. The fighters flew in a complex pattern, drawing more and more Ravagers into a specific volume of space. The enemy ships packed together trying to catch the elusive human craft. They did not realize they were being herded. Commander Yu's wingman died. Then another pilot. Then two more. She kept flying. The pattern had to be completed. Dr. Bay's screen flashed green. The targeting solution was locked. The Ravagers were in position. He sent the firing sequence to the 50 designated ships. Admiral Shin gave the order. Fire. 50 ships discharged the resonance pulse simultaneously. The weapons released no visible beam, no explosion, just a subtle distortion in space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Ravager ships began to shudder. Their organic hulls rippled and twisted. The cellular bonds holding them together broke down. One ship came apart, then 10, then hundreds. The effect cascaded through the clustered formation. Each destroyed ship released energy that amplified the pulse. The destruction spread like a chain reaction. Thousands of Ravager vessels dissolved into biological debris. A massive gap appeared in the enemy fleet. The Ravager advance stalled. For the first time in the war, they retreated. The bioships pulled back, regrouping at the edge of the system. The Allied fleet did not pursue. They were too damaged, too exhausted. But they had won. The Halcyon line held. Commander Yu returned to her carrier with only 6 fighters from her original squadron of 20. Her hands shook as she powered down her craft. She had done her duty. Her friends had died doing theirs. Admiral Shin broadcast to the fleet. They had achieved the impossible. They had proven the Ravagers could be beaten. The cost was terrible. A third of the Allied fleet was destroyed. Tens of thousands of crew members were dead, but the war had turned. The galaxy now had a weapon that worked. The resonance pulse could be mass-produced. The defensive lines would hold. The Ravagers were no longer unstoppable. In the command center, Dr. Bay collapsed into his chair. The weapon had worked. Months of calculations and theories had been proven correct. He should have felt proud. Instead, he just felt tired. The victory was real. But it was painted in blood. This was the human way of war. Brutal, efficient, merciless. The Council species were learning what it meant to fight for survival. The chase had begun. The Ravagers were retreating. And the Allied fleet would not let them escape. Not anymore. The Council chamber floated in space like a giant crystal sphere. Inside, representatives from 17 alien species sat in circular rows. Their voices echoed through the massive hall as they argued about trade routes and mining rights. It was supposed to be a normal day. Admiral Daewon Kim stood at the chamber entrance with his officers. His gray uniform was neat and pressed. The medals on his chest told stories of battles fought in distant systems. He carried a small data device in his hand. The information inside would change everything. Ambassador Ji-won Park walked beside him. She wore simple black clothing and carried herself with quiet confidence. She had been Earth's voice in this chamber for 3 years. The aliens respected her, but they never really listened. Today might be different. Dr. Hyo-rim Choi followed behind them. She was younger than the others, with dark circles under her eyes from weeks of sleepless nights. The data she had collected was terrifying. She hoped the Council would understand the danger. High Counselor Threll looked down at the humans from his elevated seat. His purple skin gleamed under the chamber lights. The Vrin had been the dominant species in the galaxy for thousands of years. He found humans amusing in their constant worry about dangers that never came. Ambassador Park stepped forward. The chamber grew quiet. A holographic projector activated in the center of the room. Images began to appear in the air above them. The first image showed empty space, dark and cold. This was the Void Sector, a region of the galaxy that no one bothered to explore. There was nothing there worth finding. Or so everyone thought. The next image changed that belief. Thousands of shapes moved through the darkness. They were ships, but not like any ships the Council had ever seen. They looked alive, organic. Their hulls pulsed like beating hearts. Dr. Choi spoke into the silence. Her voice was steady despite her fear. She explained what the human deep space probes had found. These ships were consuming everything in their path. Asteroids, planets, stations. They fed on matter and grew larger. She showed the next image. A small outpost on the edge of the void sector. Human scientists had placed it there years ago to study dark matter. The outpost was gone now. In its place was just empty space and debris. The biological ships had eaten it completely. Admiral Kim took over the presentation. He was a military man, and his words were direct. He showed the projected path of the alien fleet. Red lines traced across the holographic star map. The lines pointed straight toward Council space. The numbers were clear. At their current speed, these creatures would reach the outer colonies in 6 months. The major population centers would fall within a year. Billions of lives were at risk. The Admiral made his request simple. Evacuate the frontier worlds. Mobilize the military fleets. Prepare defensive positions. Start now before it was too late. The chamber erupted in noise. Counselors shouted over each other. Most of them were laughing. High Counselor Threll raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice dripped with amusement. He asked the humans if they really expected the Council to panic over shadows in deep space. The void sector had always been empty. These readings were probably just sensor errors. Ambassador Quirix of the Kelthon Empire stood up. His species had been exploring the galaxy when humans were still living in caves. He suggested that the humans were making up this threat to get more military funding. Humans always wanted bigger weapons and more soldiers. This was just another excuse. Other counselors joined in. They called humans paranoid, warlike, primitive. One suggested that humans saw danger everywhere because they came from a violent world. They could not understand that the civilized galaxy was safe. Dr. Choi tried to explain again. She showed them the biological analysis. These creatures were not like anything in the database. They were ancient, efficient, unstoppable. The legends spoke of them as the Ravagers. Species that had vanished long ago had left warnings about them. The counselors laughed harder. Old legends. Primitive fears. The galaxy had moved beyond such superstitions. Ambassador Park stood quietly through all of it. She let them laugh. She let them mock. When the chamber finally grew quiet again, she spoke. Her words were cold and measured. She said that humanity had presented the evidence. Humanity had offered a plan. The Council had chosen to ignore both. That was their right, she continued. Humanity would defend its own territory. Human colonies would be evacuated. Human fleets would be mobilized. Human resources would be dedicated to survival. With or without the Council's help, she made one thing clear. When the Ravagers came, when the Council species were screaming for help, they should remember this moment. They should remember who warned them. They should remember who they laughed at. The chamber went silent. Ambassador Park turned and walked toward the exit. Admiral Kim and Dr. Choi followed her. Their footsteps echoed in the huge space. High Counselor Threll called after them. He said that humanity's aggressive nature would be their downfall. They saw threats where there were none. They prepared for wars that would never come. This paranoia would isolate them from the rest of the galaxy. Ambassador Park paused at the door. She looked back at the counselor. She did not argue. She did not plead. She simply said that time would tell who was right. The humans left the chamber. Behind them, the council called for a vote. The measure to take action against the supposed threat was rejected. 15 species voted against it. 2 abstained. 0 voted in favor. As the humans walked back to their ship, Admiral Kim spoke quietly. He asked Ambassador Park if she thought they would listen before it was too late. She shook her head. They would not listen until the Ravagers were already here. By then it would cost millions of lives, maybe billions. Dr. Choi looked back at the crystal chamber one last time. She wondered how many of those counselors would still be alive in a year. The human delegation boarded their ship and departed. They had work to do. Their own people needed to be ready. The council could laugh all they wanted. Humanity would survive. In the depths of space, the Ravager fleet continued its approach. The biological ships pulsed with hunger. They did not know politics. They did not understand diplomacy. They only knew one thing: they were coming. 2 weeks after Praxis 7 fell, the council chamber looked very different. The seats were still the same. The crystal walls still gleamed. But the counselors who sat there were changed. Fear had replaced arrogance. 7 more systems had been consumed, 17 systems total. The death toll was impossible to calculate. Entire populations had vanished. The Ravagers moved faster than anyone predicted. They split into multiple fleets, attacking from different directions. The council species tried to fight back. They sent their advanced fleets with the latest technology: energy shields, plasma weapons, quantum torpedoes. The Ravagers consumed them all. Every new weapon failed. Every defense crumbled. High Counselor Threll looked older than he had 2 weeks ago. His confident voice was gone. His hands shook as he called the emergency session to order. He knew what had to be done. His pride would have to die so his species could live. Ambassador Jiwon Park entered the chamber. Unlike her last visit, no one laughed. No one made jokes. The counselor stood as she walked to the center of the floor. It was a sign of respect, a sign of desperation. High Counselor Threll spoke first. His voice cracked with emotion. He apologized. He admitted that the council had been fools. They had dismissed the human warning because of pride and prejudice. That mistake had cost billions of lives. Ambassador Quirik stood next. The proud Kelthon looked broken. His homeworld had been in the second wave of attacks. Half of his species was dead. He apologized directly to Ambassador Park. He called humans wise while his people had been blind. One by one, the counselors spoke. Each admitted their mistake. Each asked for humanity's help. Some begged. Some cried. All of them knew that without humanity they would not survive. Ambassador Park listened to it all. Her face showed no satisfaction, no anger, just cold calculation. When they finished, she spoke. She told them the truth. While the council had done nothing, humanity had been preparing. Human colonies on the frontier had been evacuated 4 months ago. Human shipyards had been converted to military production. Human scientists had been developing new weapons. Humanity had a plan. But implementing that plan across the entire galaxy would take time. Time that many council species did not have. Their fleets were broken. Their defenses were scattered. Their civilians were unprotected. The ambassador made humanity's position clear. If the council wanted help, humanity would give it. But there would be conditions. The council would grant humanity complete military command. Human orders would be followed without question. Human strategy would be implemented without debate. There would be no committees, no votes, no discussions. In war, speed was survival. Delay was death. The council species could accept human leadership or face the Ravagers alone. High Counselor Threll did not hesitate. He agreed immediately. The other counselors followed. For the first time in galactic history, the council voted unanimously on the first try. Humanity was granted emergency military authority over all council forces. Admiral Daewon Kim entered the chamber with Dr. Hyo-Rim Choi. They brought detailed tactical plans. Holographic displays filled the air above the counselors. Dr. Choi explained the situation. The Ravagers were biological weapons, possibly created by an ancient civilization. They fed on matter and energy. Their organic nature made them immune to most modern weapons. But they had weaknesses. Kinetic weapons worked. Old-fashioned explosives worked. Anything that caused physical trauma could damage them. The problem was that council species had abandoned such primitive weapons centuries ago. Their entire military doctrine would need to be rebuilt. Admiral Kim presented the human strategy. First, retrofit every council ship with human weapons. Second, evacuate all frontier colonies to fortified core worlds. Third, establish defensive lines using concentrated firepower. Fourth, train council forces in human combat tactics. The timeline was aggressive. They had 3 months to prepare before the next major Ravager offensive. 3 months to transform the galaxy's military from energy weapons to kinetic warfare. 3 months to teach ancient species how to fight like humans. The counselors asked questions. Admiral Kim answered each one directly. Yes, many would die during the transition. Yes, some colonies could not be saved. Yes, this would be the bloodiest war the galaxy had ever seen. But it was the only way to survive. Ambassador Park added one final point. Humanity would provide the leadership and the weapons, but every species would have to fight. There would be no passengers in this war. Everyone contributed or everyone died. The Council accepted. They had no choice. Over the next 3 months, the galaxy transformed. Human engineers swarmed over Council shipyards. Elegant energy weapons were torn out and replaced with crude mass drivers. Plasma banks gave way to missile tubes. Quantum shields were reinforced with thick armor plating. Human drill instructors trained alien crews. Species that had never held a gun learned to load cannons. Diplomats learned to read tactical displays. Scientists learned to aim artillery. The refugees came in waves. Billions of civilians fled the frontier systems. Human logistics officers organized the evacuation. They were efficient but not gentle. Sometimes they had to choose which worlds to save and which to abandon. Those decisions haunted them. Captain Minji Song recovered from her wounds and took command of a new ship. The Defiant Horizon had been destroyed at Praxis 7, but humanity built a replacement. This one was larger, with heavier weapons. She named it Defiant Horizon 2. Her crew was mixed now. Humans worked alongside Kelthon, Vryn, and a dozen other species. They did not always get along. Cultural differences caused conflicts, but they learned to work together. They had to. The Ravagers did not stop their advance. They continued to consume systems. But now some colonies fought back successfully. Retrofitted Council ships using human tactics won their first victories. The kills were small, but they proved that the Ravagers could be beaten. Admiral Kim established his headquarters on a massive space station. He coordinated hundreds of fleets across dozens of sectors. He slept 4 hours a night. Dr. Choi worked beside him, analyzing every battle for lessons. The galaxy waited. The Ravagers were gathering their forces for a major offensive. Human intelligence predicted they would strike at the Halcyon sector, a cluster of heavily populated systems. If those systems fell, the core worlds would be exposed. Admiral Kim made his decision. The Allied forces would meet the Ravagers at Halcyon. They would hold the line there. Victory or extinction. There would be no retreat. The galaxy's fate would be decided in one massive battle. Humanity had warned them. Humanity had prepared them. Now humanity would lead them into the fire. 6 months passed after the Battle of Halcyon. The galaxy had changed. The retreat of the Ravagers became a hunt. The prey became the predator, and humanity led the chase. The Allied fleet grew larger every week. More ships were built. More weapons were produced. The resonance pulse technology was installed on thousands of vessels. Every species that once mocked human paranoia now followed human orders without question. Admiral Daewon Kim stood on the bridge of his flagship. He studied the tactical map showing Ravager movements. The bioships were fleeing back toward the Void sector, back to their origin point, the place where this nightmare began. The Council held an emergency session. The question was simple but terrifying. Should they pursue the Ravagers to their home? Or should they fortify their borders and hope the creatures never returned? Admiral Kim addressed the Council directly. He explained the choice in stark terms. If they let the Ravagers escape, the threat would return someday. Maybe in 10 years, maybe in 100. But it would return. The only way to truly win was to end the threat permanently. Ambassador Ji-Won Park supported him. She reminded the Council of their first meeting. They had laughed at the human warning. That mistake cost billions of lives. Now they had a choice to prevent future deaths. The decision seemed obvious. High Counselor Threll spoke next. His voice was steady despite his grief. His homeworld was gone. His family was dead. He had nothing left but duty. He voted for the offensive. The galaxy would hunt the Ravagers to extinction. One by one, every council member voted the same way. There was no debate, no discussion. They had learned that lesson at terrible cost. The vote was unanimous. The Allied fleet would pursue. The largest armada in galactic history assembled at the edge of known space. 10,000 warships from 17 species. They carried enough firepower to shatter planets. And they were all under human command. Captain Minji Song commanded a battle group of 50 ships. The Defiant Horizon 2 led them into the unknown. Her crew was experienced now. They had fought at Praxis 7. They had held the line at Halcyon. They would finish this war. The fleet jumped into the Void sector. The darkness here was absolute. No stars, no light. Just emptiness that stretched forever. Sensors struggled to function properly. Navigation was difficult. But they pressed forward. After 3 days of travel, they found it. The Ravager homeworld. It was not a planet. It was a construct. A massive organic structure the size of a star system. The thing pulsed with life. Biological tendrils stretched across millions of kilometers. At its center was a beating heart the size of a moon. Dr. Hyo-Rim Choi analyzed the readings. Her conclusion was disturbing. This was not a civilization. The Ravagers were not a species with culture and society. They were a weapon. A biological machine created long ago to consume and expand. They had no malice, no evil, just an endless hunger programmed into their genetic code. It made the decision easier in some ways. This was not genocide. This was eliminating a dangerous tool that had outlived its creators. But it was still extinction. The weight of that choice hung heavy on everyone. The Ravager homeworld detected the fleet. Millions of bioships poured out from the organic structure. The final battle began. The scale was beyond anything they had fought before. The void filled with ships. Energy weapons and biological matter clashed in a dance of destruction. The Allied fleet fought with everything they had learned. Human tactics, human weapons, human determination. Captain Song led her battle group in a flanking maneuver. They targeted the tendrils connecting different parts of the structure. Severing those connections weakened the whole organism. It was like cutting arteries. Commander Byung-ho Kang coordinated fire from 30 ships simultaneously. Resonance pulses tore through clusters of bioships. Nuclear weapons vaporized the organic matter. Mass drivers punched holes in the structure itself. But the losses were catastrophic. For every Ravager ship destroyed, the homeworld created 2 more. The biological factory operated at maximum capacity. The Allied fleet was being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Admiral Kim made the final call. All ships would focus on the central heart. Ignore the bioships. Ignore the defenses. Pour everything into destroying the core. It was a suicide mission for the ships that got close enough. Captain Song volunteered her battle group. The Defiant Horizon 2 and 49 other ships broke formation and dove toward the heart. Bioships swarmed them instantly. Ships exploded on all sides, but they kept flying. Commander Kang armed every weapon they had. Resonance pulses, nuclear torpedoes. Everything with a trigger was ready to fire. They would get one shot at this. 20 ships remained when they reached firing range. Captain Song gave the order. Fire everything. The weapons discharged in one massive salvo. Light filled the void. The resonance pulses hit the heart first. The massive organ shuddered. Cracks appeared across its surface. Then the nuclear weapons arrived. Dozens of warheads detonated simultaneously. The heart exploded. The biological network connecting the entire structure failed instantly. The Ravager homeworld began to collapse. Tendrils disintegrated. The organic matter broke down into its base components. The bioships attacking the fleet went dormant, floating dead in space. The Defiant Horizon 2 barely escaped the destruction. Only 5 ships from the strike group made it out. The rest had given everything to finish the mission. The Allied fleet watched the homeworld die. It took hours for the massive structure to fully collapse. When it was over, nothing remained but scattered debris and silence. The war was won. The Ravager threat was eliminated. But the cost was staggering. Half of the Allied fleet was destroyed. Entire species had lost most of their population. Hundreds of worlds lay in ruins. The survivors gathered for a memorial service in the debris field. Representatives from every species stood together. They honored the dead. They mourned their losses. They recognized the sacrifice that saved the galaxy. Ambassador Park addressed them all. She spoke of the lessons learned. They had waited too long to unite. They had dismissed warnings from allies. They had paid the price in blood. The galaxy must never make those mistakes again. High Counselor Threll approached her after the service. He was old now, aged by grief and war. He thanked humanity one final time, not just for fighting, but for having the mercy to help even after being mocked and dismissed. Ambassador Park's response was simple. Humanity had warned because they knew what extinction felt like. They had helped because they remembered feeling alone. The galaxy would never forget either lesson. The Council reformed after the war. A permanent unified military command was established under human leadership. The old system of debate and discussion was replaced with efficient decision-making. The price of peace was eternal vigilance. Admiral Kim retired from active service. He had done his duty. The galaxy was safe because of his decisions, But the weight of all those deaths would stay with him forever. Ambassador Park became the first human Supreme Chancellor of the Council. She would guide the galaxy's recovery. She would ensure they stayed united and prepared. She would make certain the warning signs were never ignored again. Years later, a memorial was built at the edge of the Void Sector. It listed the names of every ship and every crew member lost in the war. Billions of names in hundreds of languages. At the top was a simple inscription: to those who warned, to those who listened too late, to those who fought together. The galaxy rebuilt slowly. Colonies were re-established. Populations recovered. Trade resumed. But everything was different now. The species that once thought themselves safe and superior had learned humility through fire. Captain Song continued to serve, training the next generation of officers. She taught them human tactics, human discipline, human vigilance. The lessons bought with so much blood would not be forgotten. The Void Sector was declared a restricted zone. No one would venture there again. Let the darkness keep its secrets. The galaxy had learned enough, but deep space monitoring continued. Human-designed sensor networks watched the borders. Early warning systems tracked every anomaly. If another threat emerged, the galaxy would be ready. They had paid too high a price to ever be caught unprepared again. The chase was over. The Ravagers were extinct, but the vigilance continued forever.